There we go. Sorry, everyone, for the delay. Thank you for joining us today. Connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On YouTube, subscribe to our channel at Grade Level Reading. On LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, follow us at Campaign for GLR. And on X, follow us at Reading by Third. Please use the hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learned from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to reshare. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Welcome again to today's conversation. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce this webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our enterprise and our programmatic funders, as well as our individual donors. Your support not only allows us to hold these vital conversations, but also helps us create meaningful opportunities to share insights, foster connections, and build the CGLR community. I also want to give special thank you to our Leo sustaining sponsors who you can see on this screen here. Thank you again for your support as we have these weekly webinars. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping details to share with all of you. First, we'd love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of your screen to share your name, city, or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select everyone so that we can all see each other's chat messages. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last portion of the conversation to respond to the questions you post, and our panelists will be typing out answers throughout the entirety of the conversation. The webinar is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. A link to the recording, as well as all slides, bios, and resources, will be sent in a follow-up email to all who registered. And lastly, we'll be having a brief on-screen poll during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement.
I mean, if you want more, I'm happy to.
Sounds like we got some audio. Let me take care of that real quick. There we go. Alrighty, and again, before we jump in, I just wanted to turn your attention to some of our upcoming webinars. Later this afternoon, we hope you'll join us at 3 p.m. for a conversation to discuss how new curriculum is effective and successful in classrooms. Next week on October 7th, we have an exciting doubleheader. At 12:30, we have a Crucible of Practice Salon, the Moonshot series preview. And at 3 p.m. that same day, we'll have a discussion on book abundance for early learning and development, early literacy, and early school success. Throughout the month of October, we'll continue with our live sessions. October 14th, we'll have a conversation co-sponsored by Children and Screens with Screens in the First 5 Years. And on the 24th, we'll continue our Parents as Curator series with a discussion on the evolution of homeschooling. More information and registration links for those sessions will be posted in the chat, and we hope that you can join us. And again, it is my privilege to welcome all of you to today's special peer exchange conversation, Early Relational Health, the Cornerstone and Common Thread. Before we jump into our discussion with all of our rockstar panelists, I do have the privilege of introducing Ralph Smith, Managing Director of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, who's going to share a few thoughts and get us situated before we begin our conversation. Ralph?
Thank you, Sierra. We've done so many of these webinars that we've come to expect that at least one panelist will have audio challenges, video challenges, connectivity challenges. But I didn't realize that there would come a day when that panelist would be me. And so I'm really grateful to my colleague, Bonnie Howard, for jumping in and managing this particular panel while I try to resolve some technical issues. But I really wanted to begin by acknowledging that today's audience includes a number of significant folks who work in and with and for public housing agencies and public housing communities. The issues around public housing communities were put on the screen of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading by an unusual collection of advocates. Those advocates were executives of leading public housing agencies across the nation. They argued strongly that the Campaign for Grade Level Reading's explicit mission to disrupt generational poverty required us to acknowledge, attend to, and work with the children and families served by the nation's public housing agencies. At their urging, over the past decade, the Campaign for Grade Level Reading has negotiated an MOU with HUD, has established an honor roll of public housing agencies across the country that have taken up various aspects of our work and excelled and become both bright spots and exemplars. We have supported and helped to construct the book reading initiative, book rich environments in public housing across the country, and with the leadership of inside staff from both HUD and Department of Education. I think it's been over 2 million books distributed in 60 public housing communities. It's an incredible thought. We have the All-American City Awards specifically recognized and focused on public housing. So we've been doing a lot of work. And as we've done this work, we've come to recognize and understand what those executives were telling us at the very beginning. That public housing communities bring a number of advantages and a number of opportunities that we've come to understand hidden in plain sight. Public housing communities are inherently two-gen. Public housing communities allow us access to the economically challenged families we seek to serve. It allows us to truly to meet families and children where they are, literally as well as metaphorically. And perhaps most importantly for the work of the campaign, public housing communities allow us to work with and learn from a population of economically challenged families who are not, and I repeat, not currently housing insecure. This relative degree of housing security, with its reduction in family residential mobility and school enrollment churn, this presents an opportunity for us to find ways to improve the currently chaotic systems for delivering services and supports to families. It gives us an opportunity to see whether and how we can build systems that can deliver these services and supports in the correct sequence, at the appropriate dosage, and for the recommended duration. The campaign is currently working to build two related initiatives with public housing communities. A surround sound initiative, which would be the system reform I just described, and a kindergarten parent succeeding initiative, which would work with rising kindergartners to see whether and how these systems result in improved school performance. Because we know we cannot do this work alone, we have recruited and are relying upon what we call a professional learning community, and that professional learning community is composed primarily of public housing executives who know and understand the communities in which we work, the challenges as well as the opportunities. And we're relying upon a resource partner network of organizations and programs that have experience working in and with public housing communities. And you'll hear from two of those partners today. As we put the pieces together, we know that we need what we're going to call for right now a common language frame. We need a set of ideas that are sufficiently coherent and sufficiently powerful that it can get the members of the resource Partners Network, and the professional learning community. And those of us seeking to help, it can get us on the same page, moving in the same direction. For us, that frame and the promise of that frame is represented by early relational health. And that's why I am so pleased that we were able to recruit David Willis on this panel today. Bonnie, I wish I could be with you for the entire conversation. You know, I will listen to it as soon as I get settled this evening. But I am absolutely delighted that you're leading this conversation, that we have such a great panel, and that we're introducing this set of issues to this particular audience at this time. Thank you so much. Bonnie?
Thanks, Ralph. Appreciate it. And good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're living today. As Ralph said, my name is Bonnie Howard. I'm a senior fellow with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, and I'd like to take this opportunity to also welcome you to this conversation, Early Relational Health, the Cornerstone, and the Common Thread. For this session, we pulled together an impressive panel that's comprised of national leaders to guide our conversation. They're on the front lines and they bring a wealth of expertise and experience to guide our conversation today. We hope that you'll leave this session with a deeper understanding of how early relational health brings together early childhood research and the lived experiences of families to support parents to be the brain builders, first teachers, coaches, and best advocates for their children. Building strong, positive, nurturing relationships with young children is foundational to a child's development. And our panelists today will share practical strategies for helping parents do just that. These strategies are a combination of science as well as family wisdom. In today's conversation, we also plan to address, and as Ralph laid out, the real potential for housing as a platform. As Ralph mentioned earlier, we really do believe that housing has to be integral in any early relational health ecosystem. It's by definition, two generation, offers the opportunity to deliver services and supports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. And so with that, I'm going to briefly introduce you to our speakers. You'll find their full bios in the link, and I'll tell you already, they are really worth the read. I'm going to start with Myra Alvarez. She is the president of the Children's Partnership, a nonprofit advocacy organization working to advance child health equity by ensuring all children have the resources and opportunities they need to grow up healthy and to lead productive lives. Ron Ferguson is an MIT-trained economist whose teaching, research, and social entrepreneurship spans topics ranging from economic development to school reform to family engagement. His current priority is an initiative that he launched while faculty director of the Achievement Gap Initiative at Harvard University to mobilize communities for infant, toddler, and preschool learning and brain development. It operates through The Basics, a nonprofit organization that he helped found. Miriam Westheimer has served in leadership capacities in the field of education, social service, and nonprofit management. She has spent the last 20 years adapting and disseminating a home-based early childhood program, HIPPY, which you'll hear a little bit more about. She now serves as the Chief Program Officer of HIPPY International. And our closing out our circle is David Willis. He is the professor of pediatrics at Georgetown University within the new Thrive Center for Children, Families, and Communities. There he leads the Nurture Connection, an impact network to advance early relational health. He also is the current co-chair of the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine's Forum on Children and Wellbeing. And I think we want to welcome all the panelists and welcome all of you to this conversation. And with that, I'm going to actually flip it over to David to really just set the context for this conversation and help us introduce this conversation that we're having today. I think the framing, if we can all get on the same page about the framing, will be a good starting point for all of us. So with David, I hand it off to you.
Thanks so much, Bonnie, and of course, for Ralph for this invitation. I'm delighted to be able to share with you, as Ralph called, a beginning of a common language framework that we've come to understand that this relational health framework, both a cornerstone and a common thread, really touches so many of the systems and supports around family, not the least of which is that public health the public housing as a platform. And I'm so excited for the conversation we're going to continue to have today. Next slide. First of all, I'm a pediatrician, developmental pediatrician. And Ralph, I love the words thinking about rising kindergartners, which has been for my life's work a strong interest about how do we create the experiences and the supports to assure the kindergarten well-being, which begins increasingly early. The health and relational health foundations for the future thriving and flourishing of children starts incredibly early, and we've watched how the science has made all of that more visible to us in our depth of understanding, and how the relational experiences are that driver. Like on the next slide, we've had a long-standing understanding from the decade of the brain that was captured in the good work of the Center for the Developing Child and Jack Shonkoff's work about the key elements of child development, not only of building brain architecture from early experiences, the early experiences being countered by unfortunate toxic stress or adverse childhood experiences, to an increased understanding of positive childhood experiences. And even back in the early decade of the brain, we were talking about the environment and relationships. In the last decade, it's become ever more visible that that environment of solid, positive, nurturing relationships is one of the key ingredients that builds well-being, and the context of 2-gen experiences and how families are supported set the context within which those thriving, flourishing relationships can really occur. Next slide. So I've been long time interested in thinking about the relational experiences and humbled by the challenges of all of our children in our nation. We know that about a quarter of children are actually not flourishing. We see that now as 1 in 6 children that end up with mental health challenges, even by entering school. We know that, and you all are well aware, almost a third of children are not ready for or on track for the learning environment. One would say that their earliest experiences, that pathway towards flourishing well-being toward kindergarten, something has disrupted that process. If I could have the next slide, and concepts have come forth about flourishing. And next slide, please. And come forth about the concept of flourishing. And my dear friend Christy Bethel in the National Survey of Children's Health has really elevated what we know about the caregiver-child connection, family resilience, and connectedness, the positive childhood experiences around families. These all promote that concept of flourishing for children. And the flourishing paradigm, as parents would describe their child being flourishing, is about a child's well-being. How families would describe their child's capacity for curiosity, self-regulation, and resilience. And we know that childhood flourishing predicts social emotional well-being, school readiness, engagement, and positive mental health. So much of our work about looking at the relational context is keeping forth about how do we start creating a relational and flourishing paradigm to the well-being of all children and families. Next slide, please. And we know what the disruptors are to flourishing. And far more than just social health risks like economic hardship, food insecurity, and the like, it is though the relationships themselves, as a result of the challenges in front of them, that are unfortunately can disrupt flourishing because of either adverse childhood experiences, the stress of families and their mental health conditions, the lack of social supports around families, or families that are just really struggling, that unfortunately, despite their long-term, their commitment to the wanting their children to do well and be strong, make it difficult to be the kind of parents that they want to be. Next slide. And we know too that loneliness, the lack of social cohesion and connection, is unfortunately has come to be a major disruption in well-being. And not only called out by the Surgeon General in the last administration about social connection as being a critical driver of well-being, but the next slide was really humbling when surveys in the Carolinas, if I can have the next slide, please, the parent loneliness was found that almost half of young parents who are not feeling connected to others. And that impact then, that social isolation, the struggle then that creates for the next generation of flourishing is really calling out the importance of really thinking about this paradigm of building the surround sound of relational supports, the stability of family experiences in a two-gen way, and really mobilizing together recreating the fabrics and the connecting point around young families, social networks, and the opportunity then within this public housing communities that we can talk about further. Next slide. So this space now has come to be really understood as early relational health, which is actually the foundation for health, mental health, educational readiness, and flourishing. And tomorrow at 11 a.m., National Academy of Sciences is releasing a consensus study about early relational health foundation for well-being that I hope all of you will get to see and see how within it, the broad field of early childhood views that the future common language framework of early relational health all of us can gather and move forward at that kind of vision and direction together. And there's a science to support that and a wisdom and a knowledge to move forward. Next slide. And so early relational health focuses on the importance of relationships and experiences. And by definition, it is that emotional well-being that grows in those positive connections between babies, toddlers, and their caregivers that create those positive nurturing experiences in communities of support around families. Next slide. And we know too that not only relational health is good for the next generation of children, but it's also good for the caregivers. And we have increasing evidence that the relational experience likewise creates strength for families themselves. And many families who face challenges will tell you the most meaningful moments in their lives are that with their children and the relational experiences themselves. So again, that ecosystem of support around families has benefits for the caregivers as well as for the children themselves. Next slide. And excitedly, back in 2011, the American Academy of Pediatrics, really absorbing what the science is telling us about flourishing and well-being, called out the transformation and a paradigm shift for child health care that needs to focus on connecting with communities and families to promote this relational health frame. This is really a call to arms, a call to action for the collective effort of health system, public health, and communities partnering with families to come together to advance this relational health frame that will be captured in the National Academy of Sciences report that's coming out tomorrow. Next slide. When we talk about early relational health, we talk about the ecosystem, meaning all of the positive, simple, nurturing relational experiences around families. Not only the parent-child relationship itself, but also the caregiving experiences of an informal network of family community supports, churches, neighborhoods, and family resource centers, but also the early care and education systems and others, and the public health supports that are committed to relational support. That ecosystem all creates a relational health opportunity, and certainly public housing communities can join that ecosystem of a surround sound of supports for families, which will generate our conversation today. Next slide. So what does it look like? All of us have the opportunity to witness the beauty of the relational context. Let's just show this little slide for this video for just a few moments and reflect on what you're experiencing as you witness this. Please play the video.
Uh-oh.
Okay, we can stop. The beauty of this video is showing that in-between space. We think of relational health as being that special interactive space between. And the beauty of that experience that you witness and you experience it too. So as you're witnessing the relational health experience here, that beautiful space in between, you feel the warmth between them. You witness the shared moment of meaning. You witness the joy and connection, and one can begin to see the elements that are observable in the eye contact, the smiling, the turn taking, the moment of care between them. Those elements are the relational health space that has incredible demonstrated evidence of impact in be that attachment, in the well-being, in the positive mental relational experiences that build the very foundations of what become the trajectory towards health and development and learning down the way. Let's look at the next slide video, please. And to just talk about this for a moment, relational health has a sequence of development. It's observable over time. So not only what we just witnessed with that little 6-month-old that is screaming at us as to the warmth and joy of that moment, one can likewise, as one walks up the developmental ladder, see the relational patterns that are observable and also visible to all those that watch the interactive pattern along the developmental sequence. So one can see as one watches the developmental and relational patterns as children are growing, the patterns of shared interest, the engagement with each other, those relational milestones of emotional connection, the shared initiation of them together as a relational experience, the sense of imitation with each other, the use of symbols and the very beginning of communication. Human development emerges and develops in those relational experiences that can be documented, that can be measured, that can be observed, that can be supported and encouraged. So let's show this little video for a moment.
Okay. They need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Huh? Oh, no, not this one. This is the grand finale of this one. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't bring it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Okay, we can stop. The beauty of that father-son relationship is one, they clearly know each other. They've clearly been together a long time in their time of knowing and sharing and communicating. They are of one mind, of one relational experience, sharing their experiences together, each shaping the other in the moment. That's that woo-woo space of relational health between them that is really meaningful, that actually then we would know sets the trajectory towards future developmental well-being that's come out of that relational experience. Next slide, please. There's an incredible amount of science now, neuroscience, neurodevelopment that looks at this synchrony, looks at that in-between space, and the amazing learning journey of not only what we learn in the synchrony in that interactive relational space, but the physiology, as the physician in me calls out, about the coupling of physiological systems together that form health, stress regulation, and capacity for next generation. The regulation of stress and of emotion comes in relationships. We're learning about the physiology of stress hormones that are supported and developed towards health and development in that positive, supportive, and relational experience. And we've witnessed too, from incredible neuroscience studies about the synchrony of brain activities, how the brain experiences in dyadic experiences actually builds the next generation's brain capacities. This dyadic neuroscience is beginning and emergent to show us why this relational pattern of thinking and building are the very foundations for building health development, school readiness, and life capacities for empathy, community participation, shared experience with others, social capacities, and the like. Next slide. The health system is absorbing what this means for them. And one is that building out team-based care models where we start engaging community health workers and those out of the community to be partners with families and building teams of support that are trusted and meaningful for families focused on education and support is really growing. We have guidance from the Academy of Pediatrics and Bright Futures. We believe that the foundations for reading and create the relational foundations of not only early relational health, but literacy promotion. Being so thrilled to hear about the book-rich environments that the campaign is really making visible, as is the health system. We believe in care coordination. We know there are integrated mental health and behavioral health services and activities of co-locating services in communities. Building out the medical home into the community and partnering is a relational health frame that's emerging in the health system. Next slide. Similarly, in community building and in the public health community building, really a sense of the relational health workforce expansion from how doulas partner with families in the prenatal space towards decreasing stress, narratives of healing, future well-being of their children and the birth outcomes is a relational health workforce strategy, as is home visiting that we'll hear about today, the movement of community health workers and those being individuals that are help support the families and communities, the family developmental specialists, relational care coordinators, the sense of building an ecosystem of a workforce that is supported in their role of being relationally centric, connecting with youngest of families is a real movement of change towards promoting a relational frame. Next slide. We also know that partnering with families becomes a critical element of transformation. Families, when given the opportunity, will tell you what their needs are. And if creating trusted environments where families can share honestly their experiences, their needs, and their histories, that element is transformational for every system we care about. So the authentic partnering, beyond just asking families their opinions or creating focus groups, and beyond just having one token parent on a committee, rather truly bringing in partnerships with families and engaging in their partnering and leadership of systems change becomes a major lever for creating a relational health context within which families can grow in that peer-to-peer sharing, peer-to-peer network, and how families influence other families to participate towards change and growth. That's part of the relational health movement. Next step, please. Next stage. So we talk now about local community-based powering transformation. We believe that the partnerships authentically between parent leaders, community health leaders, and early childhood system organizations come together. We call it actually the three-legged stool of advancing early relational health. And that hyper-local connecting point of those elements together are the drivers for what we think are next generation flourishing and well-being. Next slide. And we know that that becomes a way of thinking about relational health ecosystem and system building, that engaging centering the voices of families and communities in planning and movement, the collaboration of cross-sector leaders at all levels, and think about how public housing platforms can serve in that kind of role. The building of leadership capacity between health system, community leaders, public housing leaders, and families helps move a system of transformation. How data and measuring impact become really important, and how impact continuously improving data that families and communities can bring to help continue to make change becomes a part of a strategy of advancing a relational health ecosystem. Next slide. And if we think a little deeper into the housing platform and how it can be a platform for advancing flourishing, stable housing is incredibly important because it's so protective in creating a platform of stability. But it also requires housing policy to think about two neighborhood improvements, safety, food, countering food deserts, and network support, income supports when available, and strengthening those network connections around social network support, formal and informal, that can be made available for families to create that ecosystems of support. Next slide. Similarly, if you think about next step opportunities, there are not only universal opportunities for public housing communities to think about co-locating, for example, community health workers or home visitors to create flourishing coordinating systems around families in your platform. Similarly, how promoting family to family peer support learning and growth becomes a platform in that stability, because they're in every community. There are what we call an abundance of relational support people. People really do want to care and support one another when asked and created within a relational health ecosystem that can be built and supported in public housing communities. Then we can be even more targeted. There are evidence-based home visiting programs we'll hear about in a moment that can offer ever further relational support to families, as well as thinking about co-locating mental health and substance abuse programs or infant early childhood mental health consultation. These evidence-based models that can be ever more targeted to support within the housing community platforms. Next slide. So finishing up, I just want to remind us, all families dream of better for their children. As a pediatrician, had the privilege of meeting families around not only the birth of their children, but in the first weeks and months. And all families love their children and care and want something better for them than themselves. But sometimes their experiences make it hard, and then life gets harder and challenging for them. Our job is to not only to meet families, but also to meet them where they dream, to join with them in all what we believe in our commitments, to dream with them about how we can create a flourishing early relational ecosystem support, so that then that pathway of rising kindergartners meets the goals that we all have for their developing, flourishing future capacities. So I'll stop here. Thanks for the opportunity.
David, thank you so much. I have to say that those videos actually made me smile out loud. And just sort of so brought me back to my time. My daughter's now 27, but just really bringing you back to those days. And if anything, I think beautifully captures what we mean when we say early relational health. And so thank you so much for kind of setting us up for how this frame could be instrumental and really helpful to the work that we're all trying to accomplish. And I appreciate the final sentiment around meeting families where they dream. I think that's sort of a beautiful piece for us too. We've asked our three other panelists to really sort of serve as respondents in some way, and I'm going to invite Miriam to join into this conversation, and hoping that, Miriam, what you will do in this space is, first of all, give, in whatever order you choose, but give folks an appreciation for the work that you do at home at Hippie with home visiting. And then really just talk a little bit about sort of your reactions and responses to David's presentation in terms of how you feel it aligns, coordinates, enhances, can be collaborated with the work that you're doing. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Miriam, to get us started.
Thank you, Bonnie. That video with the father and son also resonates with me. I've watched it so many times. I'm sure many of you have as well. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation on early relational health. I'm delighted to be here with all of you who work every day to support families, some of you in public housing. When we think about family support, we often focus on programs and services, things like housing stability, food security, or childcare access. These are all essential. But as we have just heard, early relational health asks us to go one layer deeper. It's about the quality of the relationships that young children experience with their parents and caregivers. Those everyday interactions, the talking, the listening, the laughing, the soothing, are what form the foundation for early brain development and lifelong well-being. And that's why I'm here to talk about the role of evidence-based home visiting programs and how they can strengthen early relational health. Evidence-based home visiting programs are family support models proven through rigorous research to improve outcomes for young children and their parents. Trained home visitors regularly meet with families, often starting during pregnancy or shortly after birth. They coach parents, share child development activities, and connect them to community resources. These programs strengthen parent-child relationships, they promote school readiness, and support family health and stability. Because they are evidence-based, they have demonstrated measurable impacts, such as improved early learning, stronger parent engagement, reduced child maltreatment, and better long-term outcomes for children. There is a model alliance with representatives from several of these national models. Some of them are Parents as Teachers, Parent Child Plus, Healthy Families America, Nurse Family Partnership, and HIPPY, Home Instruction for Parents of Preschool Youngsters, which is the one I am most familiar with. There is a link that you will have that's already put in there for a link to that National Alliance where you can learn more about those different models, and then one also on HIPPY. One of the reasons home visiting is so powerful is because of when it begins. Parents are often most open to receiving support when a new baby arrives. It's a moment of joy, but also of extreme uncertainty. Parents are asking themselves, am I ready? Am I doing this right? What does this baby need from me? And that's when home visiting steps in, right at that moment of openness. A trained home visitor comes into the home, not to judge or to direct, but to walk alongside the parent, to provide tools, encouragement, and most importantly, a relationship. And programs like HIPPY provide structured activities and guidance that promote school readiness, but they also give parents the confidence to see themselves as their child's first and most important teacher. We know families need many supports to thrive, yet too often we operate in silos. Housing authorities do their work, health systems do their work, education systems do theirs, but families don't live in silos. They live it all at once. And that's why I find it striking that home visiting hasn't been more deeply embedded into housing systems. Think about it. Families living in public housing are raising the very children who will be entering our schools, joining our workforce, shaping our communities. If we know that home visiting strengthens family relationships, improves school readiness, and reduces stress, why wouldn't we connect those services directly with housing authorities where families are already present? Breaking down silos isn't easy, but when systems align, families feel the difference. Instead of juggling disconnected programs, they experience support that feels connected, responsive, and human. David addressed loneliness as a growing concern. Home visiting addresses that isolation in a very simple but profound way through a consistent, trusted relationship. A home visitor might be the one person who shows up every week, who listens without judgment, who notices when a parent is struggling. That sense of being seen and supported can make all the difference, not only for the parent's well-being, but for the child's development. Because when parents feel supported, they are more able to nurture, engage, and connect with their children. At its heart, home visiting is about building connections. Connections between parent and child, strengthening the bonds that fuels early learning. Connections between families and resources, making sure parents know where to go for healthcare, child development services, and other community programs. And connections among parents themselves, creating networks of peer support that reduce isolation and build confidence. I love the quote from a parent leader that David ended with. Don't meet parents where they are, meet parents where they dream. It reminds us that families are not just defined by their challenges. They are defined by their hopes, their goals, and their dreams for their children. Home visiting helps parents see those dreams as possible and gives them tools to move toward them. So what does this mean for those of you working in housing? It means that housing is not just a physical structure. It's about creating environments where families can grow and thrive. By partnering with home visiting programs, housing authorities can help weave together the stability of housing with the relational health that comes from strong family connections. Together, those supports create a foundation that is stronger than any one of them alone. If we bring these systems together, housing and home visiting, we have the opportunity to transform outcomes. We can reduce family stress, strengthen parent-child bonds, and ensure that children in public housing enter school ready to learn and succeed. That's the vision I want to leave you with. Housing as the foundation, home visiting as the bridge, and families as the builders of their children's future.
Miriam, thank you. Appreciate your sharing sort of your work and providing, I think, some important perspective to this. And, you know, I'm just also have to add this conversation is just sort of bringing me back a lot of years, but kind of remember that job of being a parent and feeling like it was the most important work I had ever done in my life and the one that I was perhaps least prepared to do, or at least was not confident about my ability to be good at it. And so I think this idea of really thinking about two generation approaches as we're doing all this work to really think about sort of how do we empower parents and how do we make parents sort of feel comfortable in that role, and the importance of removing sort of the stresses and the things that are barriers in the way are really critical in this work that we're trying to do together. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Ron to talk to us the same way, give us some reactions to David's presentation, and talk to us a little bit about how it aligns with the work that the Basics is doing.
Okay, great. Can I have my slides? Thanks. It's sort of amazing how the ecosystem of support for families and communities has grown over the past decade. And we are honored to be part of that ecosystem. You see, I've got a kind of long title here: The Basics, Principles, and Model, a Relational Health Framework and Community Lifestyle for Helping Children Flourish in Public Housing and Beyond. We are talking about whole community lifestyle. David used the phrase environment of relationships. Flourishing is a core word here that we're all starting to come together around. So there's a vocabulary that, as Ralph said, is starting to create a frame where we can all work together. Next slide. We started, launched officially about 10 years ago, motivated by the fact that skill gaps by race and ethnicity, by parent education level, are fairly stark by the time kids are 2 years old. I was the faculty director of the Achievement Gap Initiative when I learned this. Some other people may have already known it, but I figured this is something we needed to do something about. And so the Basics Initiative spun out of the Achievement Gap Initiative at Harvard, and I've got on the side of the screen, you'll see the Basics Inc. is our nonprofit, supports relational health by helping agents of change in communities, regions, and states build capacity for supporting parents and other caregivers, in promoting children's cognitive and social emotional development for kindergarten readiness and overall flourishing. And that's what we're all about. All of us here together about that same mission. We could probably describe several different initiatives in almost exactly the same language. Next slide, please. David used the phrase surround sound. We use the phrase socio-ecological saturation. We want to saturate the parent social ecology with information and encouragement and reminders to make what we call the Basics Principles everyday experiences for children. Next slide. We are organized around 5 principles of early childhood development. We convened a National Expert Advisory Committee to try to boil the research down to 5 actionable principles around which parents and communities can organize to help cultivate the kinds of relational support that David is talking about. You'll see the first principle is maximize love, manage stress. The second is talk, sing, and point. The third is count, group, and compare. The fourth is explore through movement and play. And the fifth is read and discuss stories. Each of these has a ton of research behind it to justify our focus on it as among the everyday activities that we'd like to see children experience from birth to 5 and beyond. The advantage of these 5 principles is that they do fairly holistically cover what the experts say children need to experience. Our work operates through other frontline providers who are trusted messengers with parents. And so these principles are integrated into the work that these other folks do. And we emphasize people, you don't need to change your framework, just crosswalk it so that other people in your community know that we're talking about the same stuff. And this language, these 5 principles, will tend to integrate most of the other frameworks that people use and help to create a more holistic sense of what we're all trying to achieve. We're all trying to create an environment that maximizes love and helps parents manage their stress. When we first started, it was maximize love, minimize stress, but a parent told us, don't come in here and tell me to minimize stress. I might be able to manage it. That's when we changed the language. But we want that to happen across the community. The serve and return that a lot of you have heard about, that's the talk, sing, and point. The count, group, and compare, helping young children learn to pay attention to patterns. Even infants are aware of magnitudes, and there's research that documents that awareness. Explore through movement, play. We want parents to welcome children's curiosity. We want them to be a learning partner with their child. And read and discuss stories. It's not really even about reading. It's about spending time with books. We tell parents, if your child can't read, they don't know if you're reading. So just tell the story, point at the pictures, speak with expression. So again, our goal is really all 5 principles every day, every child. We want this to be what children experience through their life, through lots of different settings. And these are all different ways of living out the relational health, the relational aspirations, that environment we're talking about. Next slide. Next slide. We try in lots of different ways to capture the emotion of what we're talking about here. This is a poem that's scaffolded on those 5 principles. Let them know every day that I love them. That includes when I'm tired and stressed. Yes, we talk, sing, and point as we go back and forth, having fun with the thoughts we express. We count fingers and toes and put objects in groups, and we find lots of things to compare. We explore while we play and discover new things, and we do it almost everywhere. We read stories and books and discuss what we think, and sometimes what the books make us feel. Yes, the basics are things that we do every day as a fun way to make our dreams real. You can imagine that little poem on somebody's dresser in the bedroom, and they glance at it occasionally and get a sense of what the aspiration is. Next slide. We talk about 3 strategic components. Sometimes you call them the 3 gears for making the basics principles daily routines: information, reminders, and encouragement. Next slide. So if we think about what can happen in public housing, next, keep going, keep clicking. Okay, we can prepare staff to integrate the principles and ideas for things to do with children into the work that they do as resident services coordinators. Next slide. We can use public spaces to display posters and other visuals that remind people of these ideas and the things that we want kids to experience. Next slide. We can enroll people for our text messaging program. We have twice weekly text messages that go from birth or to 5, or from the time the family signs up until 5. They're scaffolded on the standard frameworks, the early childhood frameworks in the system. And we get these glowing testimonials from parents who feel more confident after they're getting these messages that their kids are on track and that they know what to do. And so it's the foundation, it's an anchor resource. We're not a text messaging program. We're more general than that, but text messaging is one tool. Next slide. Click again. Engaging parents in lots of roles. These are 2 parents that are tabling at an event. We have a video book that actually opens up and there are videos in it, and they're holding up the video book. But there are lots of ways to engage parents, not only to help engage other parents, but to do some of the work and to actually table at events and so on. Next slide. We work largely through partner organizations. We don't actually touch parents through our organization. We help to facilitate the work that other people do. This is a librarian here holding up one of the talking points handouts that we distribute across communities. Next slide. Developing rituals, building rituals into the work of the organization so that certain things you do every year, we produce an annual calendar with art from one of the local art schools, and we distribute that in Boston in particular. We're in lots of other cities, but in Boston we distribute it across the whole city, and it's kind of something people know is coming. There's going to be a new calendar. Organizations across the city are going to be asked to push those out. Next slide. And we have research built into the work. And one of the most interesting findings is that the biggest changes, particularly with the text messaging over the first several months, is that the families that rated lowest on future orientation and persistence, on agreeing that I'm the type of person who plans for the future, I'm the type of person who keeps going when life gets difficult. The ones that rate lowest are the ones that experience the biggest differences in the use of basics-related parenting practices over the first several months. So it's helping people to shift their mindset from a future orientation, trying to deal with everything just today, to one where at least a part of their brain is thinking that there are things that I can do with my child that are going to make life better for the entire family. And that's inspirational. That's part of what keeps me going in this work. And I will stop with that.
Great, Ron. Thank you so much. Appreciate the sort of sharing your presentation and your thoughts with us as well. I'm feeling like there is a lot of alignment, and that the work that you all are doing at the Basics and at Hippie really captures the components and elements of early relational health. Like they're sort of there and ingrained in the work that you're doing. And I appreciate the sort of just kind of nod to how we could think about housing in this space as playing a deeper, bigger role. And Mara, I want to bring you on to talk about the Children's Partnership and your work in California, and also get your reactions to early relational health and David's presentation, and sort of how it aligned and kind of fits with the work that you're doing in the Children's Partnership in California. And I know you'll bring a little bit of a policy perspective to this conversation as well, which I think will be a nice rounding out. So I will turn it over to you, Myra.
Thanks so much, Bonnie. And huge thanks to the GLR team for the opportunity to join this conversation and be amongst my esteemed fellow panelists. So thank you so much. There's so much connection to the work that we do at the Children's Partnership. But first, let me introduce who we are. For those of you that don't know us, we are a California advocacy organization, and we specifically focus on advancing child health equity. And we do that work through community engagement, through research, and of course, through policy analysis and advocacy. And I want to talk a little bit about how we approach that work, because I think our approach to advocacy really speaks to some of the fundamental values and principles that make up both what David talked about in his presentation, but also what Ron talked about in his presentation as well. So one of our core beliefs at the Children's Partnership is that a child is a child. It doesn't matter that child's background, it doesn't matter that child's language of origin, their economic status, that all children are our children. And if we approach taking care of our children from that perspective, it changes what our policy priorities are going to be. A second core belief of ours is that dismantling systemic racism is a necessity for children to thrive, recognizing that many of our systems, our programs, are rooted in white supremacy and racism that is not meeting the needs of our children today. Our diverse children, our white children, our low-income children, our inner-city children, our rural children. That racism impacts us all, regardless of our background. And then a third important priority, core belief to us, is that community input must guide our work, so that our policy priorities can't only be what research and the ivory tower tells us, but that we got to listen to the voices of people today. And I think I heard that loud and clear from both Ron and David in what we need to do to create better systems and programs and initiatives that are responsive to what families need today. We have a couple of other core beliefs, but I really wanted to hone in on those three because you'll hear about that as I talk about how I responded to this moment. So in thinking about early relational health and the policy priorities of an advocacy organization like ours, I thought about three overarching takeaways. The first is this need for a whole child, whole family, whole community approach to taking care of families' needs. To Miriam's comments, families do not live in silos. We have to think about all of the various challenges that families are grappling with in order to be responsive in this moment from a policy perspective, but also from a program perspective. And for us at the Children's Partnership, we are very proud to lead in California a coalition called Bringing Up California. There's a number of coalitions across the country that are trying to prioritize those early years of life in our policy priorities and with advocacy. And Bringing Up California, we look at a whole child approach that it envisions a society that's rooted in racial and economic justice, where all children are embraced, valued, and cared for, where they have access to systems and services that promote their health, well-being, and the life opportunities that enable them to thrive. It's where culture is valued, where there are holistic approaches that value racial, cultural, linguistic identity, and that support a child's sense of belonging. And again, this is all coming up in what David talked about, what Ron talked about, what Miriam talked about, and the types of programs that we need to have. The second main takeaway was this power of partnership and collaboration, particularly at this time. And in particular, when we think about housing and the role that housing plays for families, there is no mistaking the link between housing and the economic well-being of families, but also the mental health and well-being of families, the stress of not being able to put a roof over your child's head, or not being able to pay rent, or having to use resources to pay rent instead of putting food on the table. All of that is impacting families' ability to thrive. And I want to really hone in. I'm from California. We're a very large state. Everyone looks to California and often points to, how progressive we are and how responsive we are. But I want to just bring us home for a minute about the issue of the unhoused. We have 55,000, actually closer to 70,000 children now under the age of 3 that are unhoused. That's 70,000 children that do not have a safe, secure home that is fundamental to their well-being. Only 1 in 6 of our infants and toddlers that are experiencing homelessness are enrolled in an early learning and care program. 1 in 6. And then 27% of California children ages 0 to 2 live in crowded housing, which is very important to emphasize that crowded housing can be incredibly disruptive to a child's development. Everything from not being able to have a place to grow up and play and sleep well, to illnesses and being sick more often, to not having the security of being able to have your own space for their parents, right? That is the highest rate in the country. So when we think about homelessness, when we think about housing and the unhoused, there is so many connections, intersections with the well-being of children. And in this moment, we know from our partners at Schoolhouse Connection, for example, that we've seen a 23% increase in the last couple of years in the number of infants and toddlers experiencing homelessness. So when we think about the approach to housing and improving housing programs across the country, regardless of which side of the aisle we're on, regardless if it's a blue state or a red state, housing and the cost of living is a detriment, it's a challenge to the well-being of our babies, of our birthing people, of our families. And so that really calls this power of partnership and how we can collaborate more effectively in order to center the experience of young children and their families as we consider housing initiatives moving forward. Again, the challenge of housing, the challenge of rent has been around for quite some time in California, and obviously now with this shift in conversation towards really prioritizing what young children need in order to benefit all of our communities. I'm excited that this topic of conversation around the intersection of these issues is coming more to the forefront and trying to figure out how do we be more intentional about the housing initiatives that are moving forward and what they can uniquely do to better serve young children and their families. So again, thinking about housing bonds and what's been moving forward and how we're trying to have programs that specifically focus on families of young children. The idea that there are not enough emergency shelters for birthing people, for breastfeeding women, for breastfeeding mothers, for families of young children. That it needs to be emphasized that the diversity of experiences in order to be responsive, the relationship between early childhood policy experts and housing experts can absolutely help a community better thrive if we center the experience of young children and their families. But it goes beyond that to really think through also what are additional initiatives that can be supportive, whether that's rent caps, algorithmic house fixing, other policies that will benefit families with children. And so last thing I will say is as we think about this time of of really questioning what does a public program look like in the village of support that families need to raise healthy, thriving children. I think there's a lot of questions that are coming up across the country about who's responsible for raising our children. And for those of us that are at least part of this conversation, I saw a lot of hearts go up when I talked about all children are our children. And if they are, how does the concept of it takes a village to raise a child, who is part of that village, and how do we ensure that these housing programs that our community health workers and promotoras that we want to have in those housing programs, the health system that then employs them or connects to them, that all of that is considered part of the village that we know families need, not only in today's day and age, but for timeless and timeless forever, that families need that village to raise healthy, thriving children, and that government programs, public housing, public programs are a critical component of that. So I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Mara. Appreciate that sharing sort of your experience and the realities. And I'm sure a lot of the things that are happening in as California is a microcosm for, as folks look around this different states, I think they would find the same challenges relative to housing and the number of kids who actually are having positive and strong early relational experiences. And I wasn't going to jump right here, but just sort of given your conversation, I think it's important for us to like realize this moment of disruption politically that we're all in. Like as early as today, we're really looking at the possibility of government shutdowns, and this is kind of happening in real time. And I think sort of thinking about that, I'm just curious as to, are there some bright spots that are out there that we can hold on to, feel that there is the potential for positivity and momentum? Like, are there things that are happening that we should be thinking about as it relates to sort of policy implications? Because I think that's the way that you actually kind of get to greater scale, right? Is by really having sort of policy prescriptions in place that can make a difference for kids and families. And so just sort of, again, with the sobering reality of where we are, I'm just curious as to what you guys are thinking as you kind of look out your windows as to what's possible sort of in this moment that can give us some hope.
Sure. I mean, I can just build off of what David said as one of his slides as far as what's to come. And I share his dream of having a community health worker in every, public housing project or housing initiative. Time and time again, survey after survey, focus group after focus group, families tell us how difficult it is to navigate systems of support, how difficult it is to navigate a complicated healthcare system, or if you have a child that has developmental delays, that early intervention system, that it is hard. And having a champion with you to help walk you through, navigate those questions, someone with lived experience from your community, is a dream, right? Is what anyone, regardless of their background, would want. And we are incredibly encouraged at the support that we see across the country, in California as well, for community health workers and promotoras to be paid for by our Medicaid system, recognizing that they are a critical component of the care team of the healthcare delivery system in order to connect families with the resources that they need to be healthy. We've got some ironing out of the details, right? Like the payment structure, the competencies, the training, but the idea of support for the value, the wisdom, the leadership of community members and what they contribute to a care team, I think that has grown astronomically, particularly in the last decade. And to really explore and dream about what that might look like in the future, I think the conversation today about integrating housing and health is a clear example of a bright spot for the future that will directly impact the well-being of young children.
Myra, that's so strong. I mean, along our journey, not only from home visiting, but into the early relational health work and then our nurture connection work, what was been really striking is the wisdom that informal networks that have come out of perhaps, of course, doula networks, the doula care providers that have been around multiple generations. And they create, of course, supportive relationships and then narrative. They listen to the stories of the young mothers and then their families, and often sharing their own healing journeys. And that shared experience of narrative and support has tremendous healing and growth. That in and of itself is bringing a lot of hope and possibility. The other thing is, the old pediatrician in me says every day there's the birth of new baby, and their families love them and want well for them. And that brings a lot of hope. The second thing along that journey is what we've been witnessing in the last 6 months to a year is how local community networks, formal and informal, are building to take care of one another. And that local support that is relationally centric, countering isolation, is likewise a movement building moment that we can watch and see. Then the last thing, Mara, I'm so glad you called out the emergency of infant homelessness. I remember 15 years ago when I was involved in home visiting, I heard that the most frequent cause of homelessness of a young mother is the birth of her baby. And that's an emergency. And that calls out for intentionality of the partnering in communities with not only stable housing, but also the networks of people that care deeply about that whole family, whole child, whole community effort to the most vulnerable, which is in that relational health vulnerability or that relationship building opportunity that could address, infant homelessness, infant family homelessness as a relational strategy. It's an important observation.
Yeah, Bonnie, you asked about hope in this moment of diminishing resources potentially for this work. It reminded me a little bit of the early 80s when Reagan came in and we were all scared to death that all this good work from the 60s and 70s was going to go down the drain. But there was a lot of creativity during the 1980s that helped to produce a bit of paradigm shifting in the ways that we were addressing the work in these communities. And one of the things that is different now is the appreciation for social fabric in communities that we've referred to in various ways. And one of the issues that I think about often is the fact that the people who play the integrating roles in helping to weave that social fabric, they need to get paid.
Yeah.
We need to have people who, the roles of the community health workers has been referred to several times here. They're helping to make those connections, that are helping families to navigate, that are integrating all these different ideas we have and delivering them to families in coherent ways. That's kind of a new job in the system, particularly in the way that we're thinking about it now. And so even as resources diminish, we can't do as much of everything as we would like to do. Creating space for that social capital building role, for that community health worker role, may be part of the resource priority dynamic that we need to pay attention to. A lot of us are creating social good, public good, so to speak, in this system, and the very nature of a public good is that it won't be provided unless the public sector provides it. So we need to figure out some way to support these public goods that help the rest of the system to work in this social relational dynamic realm.
Yeah, and thanks for adding a little bit more substance around sort of the role of the community health worker, because I think we kind of all talk and assume everybody knows what that is. But I think that was some additional language to help folks understand what that person does and the importance of that really being something that's recognized as a real paid position in the community is really important too. Miriam, I know you have some good news too that you can kind of share something to give us some hope. So just wanted to get your voice in here too.
Yeah, not sure if it's good news, but Mario, when you were talking about looking at the needs of all children, and I think by taking a universal approach and saying when we look at a community, we're looking at all children, then we have to engage everybody, right? And we set the standard for what it is that we want all children to have. We want all children to be ready for school. And then we look at what different communities, different families need in order to get there. And I feel that now in this really challenging time, people are more engaged. People who otherwise would have felt, oh, I'll be okay. My kids will be okay. The schools will be okay. We're okay. Aren't feeling that. And I think it's a time when we can galvanize communities and people to say, okay, what is it that is the norm that we expect our society to be able to provide for everybody? And then it's the targeted universalism, right? You set the goals and then you find the programs, the supports, the resources you need so that everybody gets there. Some will need more, some will need less, but those goals are the same. And I do feel this is a time that people in communities are more open to coming together and having those conversations because things feel so uncertain.
I think the phrase targeted universalism that you just used
Yep.
is important in this context because often we think, well, we got to help
Both.
poor folks. We got to help the folks that are most down and out. And most of what we're talking about is human stuff. I say it even applies to primates more generally, right? And so being clear that this is not screening anybody out, it's just prioritizing the folks that need to be prioritized, even as we open it up to all of humanity, so to speak.
And in the field of home visiting, there are universal home visiting programs and every family that has, a new baby coming into the home should have access to someone to knock on their door and say, how you doing? And what do you need? And for some, that might be a phone call. For some, it might be nothing. Thank you so much for coming. I have my family here. I have other supports. And for some, it may be a whole list of things. But we should all have access, and it should be expected that at that stage of, a family's life, there is the community as a whole, social supports provide for families in that way.
Yeah, Miriam, you're knocking on the door of the paradigm shift here.
Yeah.
Because if you look at that, the data I showed of 47% of young parents saying they're lonely with babies, and that's cross economic.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, in fact, if you really look at the flourishing data, it's not just the quote unquote, those challenged and marginalized, it's the whole population. The mindset is one in this country of isolation and autonomy and doing it myself and not asking for help. When in fact, relationally, and one would argue for all of us, connectedness is the best protector for our well-being at every level. The best protection of our managing stress is the connections with others. Hence why the relational health work is trying to break that paradigm about isolation. And more importantly, breaking the paradigm that individuation of young child development is not the goal. It's a relational connections, the real goal of human development. And those are paradigm shifts that have to be sung at every level.
I just want to follow up on that. I deeply appreciate what you just said, David, about that there's this pressure to do it alone, right? I think the Surgeon General called this out, right? This concept of it takes a village to raise a child, like that's something we throw out now, but like that village has gotten smaller and smaller for people. There's this shift towards this individualized nuclear family model that frankly it's very hard for us to have that as we move away from family, as we go back to doing everything on our screen, everything is virtual. It becomes harder and harder as we move away from the third spaces that we don't have communities gathering. It is that much more difficult. And I think that is what is causing also mental in illness and instability, in addition to these economic challenges around us. So I really appreciate you calling that out, and how much of the work that has been talked about today with promoting community leadership and community health workers, with stronger partnerships between housing and health programs, that is creating connection, creating community in ways that chip away at that philosophy that is impossible to achieve, that all families, regardless of background, will benefit from. So just really appreciate those comments. Thank you.
I want to put one more big rock on the pile. Young men.
Mm.
There's a crisis of young men in the United States. some producing babies, some are not producing babies, but they're lonely, they're living on the internet, they're alone, they're disconnected, um, and figuring out how to integrate their welfare into this issue. Most of these discussions are thinking about mothers and babies, even if it's multi-generational, it's grandma and mom and baby. Um, and so I don't have an answer to that, but I think if we can integrate everybody, including and particularly in public housing development, a lot of those young men we're talking about are there in those developments. And how can we help those developments structure work that gives them a role to play, gives them a reason to get up in the morning when they don't have a job to go to, gives them a way to feel respected by the people who have all the little babies running around, helps them understand something about early childhood development so they can be part of that conversation. And so that is a big rock that I think should be in the bottle.
Yeah, well, I think it's sort of families as you define families, right? And it also, I think, speaks to this need for some targeted universalism. Like there are certain populations that need specific things, right? And sort of in that vein, I just would like for you guys to talk a little bit more about, we've got a lot of research and we've got a lot of science sort of in this work, but this sort of cultural wisdom and community voice and community perspective sounds sort of really good in a sentence, but I'm curious as to how you guys think about just sort of operationalizing that for folks. Like, how does that really look on the ground? Sort of how do you engage that sort of the value of that sort of in the work that you do? What does it look like?
Well, for us, there are a number of different types of networks that happen at the community level that tend to be sometimes idiosyncratic to the community because they're building on historically defined social relations. But bringing people together and giving them roles to play. I mean, we're starting more and more to have parent advisory groups, and they help to figure out what role they can play. You're clear. I mean, our goal is all five basics every day, every child. And so, what can any particular person do to contribute to that happening? And again, having the community health workers, others whose job it is to help convene those conversations and help to coordinate the work that results from those conversations is a piece of that. But it's very much on the ground. It's very much idiosyncratic to the particular communities. It's very dependent upon the social relationships, good and bad, that may already obtain in each environment.
I appreciate that leadership. And from the Nurture Connection view, we engage parent leadership in all of our work and at every level of what we do, be that our research agenda, be that our communication agendas, be that system building locally. Parent partnership is a critical element of that work. And also the building parent leadership to be able to engage in partnering at tables of leadership and change. So like was said from our colleagues at CSSP, from the parent perspective, nothing about us without us. And all planning at every level of initiative building should include authentic parent partnership from multiple ethnicities and multiple communities in terms of generating then how are we going to create authentic transformational activities and change. It's a heavy lift, but unless we begin in that way intentionality, things will not change.
And Bonnie, there are some home visiting programs that employ parents who have been in the program to serve as home visitors. So it's through the lived experience of being in the program that they then say, okay, I've done this program with my child. I now want to get the extra training and work with my, peers, members of my community. And that is another way it both brings in employment into communities. It also pretty much leads to the peer-to-peer model, and gives parents that sense of, I've done it for myself, for my child, I can do it for others, and then what else can I do, right? And they can move on to all kinds of other opportunities. And there are a few models that take on that approach.
I think building on that point, and I completely agree with Ron and David's comments as well, as far as parent engagement. I think this opportunity to create safe and culturally affirming spaces by building the capacity of our providers, of our home visitors, of our promotoras, of our childcare providers, and really recognizing that it matters to see someone that looks like you. Especially like in programs like home visiting, I super appreciate Miriam. Everyone wants someone coming to their door, except at this time, right? Not everyone wants someone coming to their door, but if someone that looks like them and speaks their language, to your point, I think that's the critical factor, the critical shift in what we need in our systems that speak to the lived experience, speak to the trust that needs to be built. And in childcare in particular, thinking about our early care and education workforce and uplifting our abuelitas and our tias and really, again, seeing them as the workforce that they are is just another example of integrating community leadership in a very challenging space that could strengthen housing programs and housing units by having childcare on site, right? Like as we're building new units, there's so much opportunity to really integrate parent leadership and community leadership in the very programs that we have already, but also in thinking ahead with planning of new housing initiatives moving forward.
I see one point of subtlety is managing the boundaries between expertise, the boundaries between different types of expertise. You can say, well, parents know best. Well, there might be something that comes out of the research that's pretty firmly established that's different from what some parents think they know. And so managing those conversations that honor everybody, but that still allow there sometimes to be a contest of ideas at the boundary between the different types of expertise that are at that table. And so I'll leave it at that.
I think we need another hour, Bonnie.
Sure.
You got to have tensions in all this work. There are just tensions, like sort of pushes and pulls at every lever, right? As you kind of think about what's important. But I think sort of having that sort of cultural perspective and authentic voice and understanding sort of how much wisdom and intelligence is sort of in the communities that you're working with is such a central core to start with, and has not always been the way that we've done this work. And I think that housing also provides us a very unique platform, right, from which to kind of jumpstart some of these ideas that we're talking about, because you do have multiple generations and you have access to families and to kids. And so when you have that space, you want to go in there and do it right the first time. And I think that's really good advice, that is a good first right principle to kind of have in your toolbox.
I'm
going to give you, go ahead,
real
David.
quickly, and that is that in the early relational house space, the sharing of wisdom and learning is ever more experiential than teaching. And so the multi-generational experiential wisdom of caregiving is a peer-to-peer support effort, far less than an educational model alone. So the more people are connected generationally, the more the wisdom of child rearing grows and the supports are supported. So it's an evolutionary process now.
Yep. Appreciate that. I'm going to give you guys each just sort of a parting word. We're like a minute or two to the close of our session. So I just wanted to give you, each of you have sort of a closing thought, comment, advice. Take a second and just do that. Can we start with you, Ron?
I think we're at a hopeful moment. I mean, this conversation didn't happen 5 years ago. I think a lot of us have thought hard, have worked hard to put in place arrangements to try to support what we would like to see happen in communities. I think there's total complementarity between what we're trying to do. I think our motives are all the same as we do this, and the more we can move forward together, the more coherent the work will be to the communities that we're trying to reach with this work. So it doesn't seem like there are a million different voices coming at folks, but there's some at least core themes that they can recognize that cut across. And so I'm optimistic, and I would invite folks on the call, if you're interested in what we're doing, we'd be happy to set up opportunities to interact more about that. My email address is ron.ferguson@thebasics.org.
That's his commercial. David, yeah. I'm going to let you just close us out. And let me say thank you to everybody, to all of our panelists, to the participants, and everybody who joined us. Thanks. But David, your last word is yours.
It's been a pleasure here. Take a look at our Nurture Connection Network, because we let make visible the movement that's happening. And then secondly, again, tomorrow, National Academy of Sciences consensus study, early relational health, calling out what we can all do to collectively into the future, which brings me tremendous hope. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much. Hey, team, you have one last slide of upcoming events? All right, just so that everybody knows, stay tuned. We have lots of good things in the future. You can find them all available on our website for times and places. So thanks everybody for being with us today. We look forward to the next opportunity to get together and learn. Have a great day.